The world of Resident Evil Village is populated with creatures that both terrify and impress. Whether it's the lords of the village, a portly traveler peddling his wares, or maybe a magical baby destined for greatness, they all have strengths and weaknesses. I'm Andy Borkowski for VGS, and today I want to figure out who is the most powerful entity in Resident Evil Village. Obviously, this is a very personal and subjective opinion, but I do think based on what we know of the entities in Village, we can come together on some sort of consensus. Still, I imagine this will upset some of you who are listening. I'll be using the tier maker template. I've also included a link below if you do want to create your own. Here are the contestants I will be judging today. Donna Beneviento, the Puppet Master, Salvatore Moreau, the Fishman, the Urias Trio that roam the village, Carl Heisenberg and his robot army, Lady D and her infected daughters, Mother Miranda, and of course Ethan. I also have some mystery entries that I think might be worthy of discussion at the end. Let's begin, though, at the bottom. Salvatore Moreau, Donna Beneviento, and the Urias Trio. Moreau the Fishman is perhaps the most deformed of any of our contestants, not able to move freely and speaks with great difficulty. His body does secrete enzymes, though, that create natural barriers that can be manipulated. His real power, though, comes from his transformed states. This fish beast that he turns into can travel through the water with lightning speed, spewing bile and raining acid. Even when outside of the water, this monster can still attack and defend himself with ease. Unfortunately, though, this transformed state is unreliable, and in the game, once Moreau doesn't have complete control over it, it's hard to tell if he'll ever have it again. I think it's safe to say that anyone in the game could defeat Moreau when he's in his crying, eating cheese state, but how often will he stay in that form is the real question. He's competing against Donna Beneviento, the doll maker who is perhaps the least assuming physically of any of our contestants. Her abilities, though, are more subtle. She controls the minds of those that cross paths with these infected plants, causing them to have vivid, terrifying hallucinations that we know can cause death. She also controls several dolls she created thanks to their Cadeau link. She has, unfortunately, a severe mental illness and rarely leaves her home where these powerful flowers grow. Then we finally have the Urias Trio. More minor characters in the game, but they have all been infected by the Cadeau parasite and have super strength and super resilient abilities. With some able simply to be felled by bullets, Urias Trio is a much more heavily infected entity and requires both bullets, bombs, and planning to be killed. Considering all that, it's time to decide a loser. Based on the limitations of their powers and instability, which is the key factor here, I think Donna Beneviento is our weakest entity since most of her powers are so reliant on those magical flowers and being inside her home. She sits uncomfortably in the F tier. Next in the D column has to be Moreau. Although his fish form is formidable, it's not reliable and does need water to excel. If anyone caught him outside of the water, I think he would die pretty quickly. Which leaves us with the Urias Trio in the perfectly respectable C tier with some weaknesses and some strengths. My next choice I think may be controversial, but in the B tier, we have Chris and the Houndwolf Squad. The boulder-punching asshole himself does have such a pedigree in killing the undead for generations, and with his support team, I do believe that all of the other entities I've discussed so far would fall to them. But Chris ultimately is still just a man, incredibly resourceful, but still limited by his gear and the know-how he possesses. There is one being that I do think Chris and his team could possibly match up against. Lady D and her daughters 3. The genetically mutated Megamama has seeming invulnerability, is 10 feet tall, knives for nails, and she can turn into a dragon, while her daughters are in fact carnivorous flies that can form and reform into terrifying women. But all of them, as terrifying as they are, do have fatal flaws. With the daughter, it's the colds. Once they've hit it, they can turn into stone and be killed easily. With Lady D, it's a dagger that affects her ability to keep in one state, making her vulnerable to attack. As powerful as they are, those fatal flaws could be exploited by Chris and his team, especially given their background, as Ethan was able to exploit them. The question is, would Chris and his team be able to make it out alive if they were in the same position that Ethan was, remembering again that Ethan can attach an arm if it happens to get cut off. Next, we have the Lord of Metal and Steel himself, Karl Heisenberg and his robot army. Heisenberg can control metal and has a genius intellect, along with a powerful monstrous form that can withstand tank shots. Despite being physically vulnerable in his base state, he does have an army and could possibly even stop bullets with his power. We do know he can live and operate in any place at any time and still have that power. If he gets stabbed by a magic dagger, nothing will happen to him besides the fact that he's stabbed. I think this places him respectfully in the A tier, along with his most hated rival, Mother Miranda. This one was the one I struggled with most, since all of the previous beings, except for Chris, owe their powers to Miranda. She, of course, has that direct link to the Megamycete. She can control the mold within the village, making her nearly invulnerable. She can travel almost anywhere the mold persists, and she can be almost anyone. But her strength is also her greatest weakness. Once that link to the Megamycete is frayed, she does become vulnerable, as we see in the game. That reason alone is why she does not sit comfortably in the S tier. Now, finally, we have our main man, Ethan Winters, a seemingly normal dude that can reattach his body parts thanks to mold powers and has a real tough time dying. Objectively, we do know that thanks to the game, he does have the ability to kill all of the previous lords mentioned. But in doing so, like Miranda, he may have lost his own life when the Megamycete was destroyed. Although if you've been paying attention to some of my previous videos, Ethan Winters may not be dead. This still cements Ethan's place in the coveted A tier. Now we have our mystery contestants. Probably not a mystery, but what entities are even more powerful than the monsters we just covered? What could possibly match the might of the beings discussed? Why, of course, we have the Manscaped Performance Package 4.0, which includes the Weed Whacker ear and nose trimmer, ball deodorant cleaning wipes, boxer briefs, and the new Lawnmower 4.0, promised to be as powerful at cutting your junk as Lady D's fingernails without any nicks, cuts, and dismembered limbs. At checkout, use code VGS to get 20% off and free shipping on the Manscaped Performance Package 4.0. Now, someone who appreciates that deal that I just clumsily added to this video is our real contestant, the Duke. He is in the S tier. This profound man cannot be killed despite our efforts. He can travel nearly anywhere despite his ample frame, and is seemingly both respected and maybe even feared by the strongest beings in the village. Everyone else on the list is benefiting, though, since the Duke seemingly is interested in only one thing: mercantile endeavors, despite all of these world-ending abilities. Joining him at the top is one other, the mysterious Rose. As a child, she survived being split apart and then reanimated thanks to the mold. Not only she survived, but she actually thrived and was able to absorb some of Miranda's power. Now, as an adult, there is reason to believe that she has the powers of the Megamycete without the drawbacks and weaknesses that we've seen from previous entities. And with that, your list is complete. starting with the Duke and Rose at S tier, Ethan, Miranda, and Heisenberg at the A tier, Chris, the Houndwolf Squad, with Lady D and her children in the B tier, the Arias Trio at C tier, Moreau at D, and Donna at F. If you've listened to all this and now you're in a great rage and think you can do better, please do show me below who you think is the most powerful being in Resident Evil Village. Stick around, I still have a couple more videos I want to discuss with you about the world of Resident Evil and maybe where it's going next. I'm Andy Borkowski for VGS.